Hello everyone, it's Wednesday and you're watching Within the Frame, where we delve deeper into the top stories not only in South Korea but across the globe. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. February 8th marks the 75th founding anniversary of the Korean People's Army. Pyongyang is widely expected to hold a military parade with satellite images showing practices underway at Mirim Parade Training Ground and Sunan International Airport. Given the projectors and light towers around Pyongyang's Kim Il-sung Square, it is expected to take place at night. The question is, will Kim Jong-un deliver any message himself? Will the North unveil its latest weapon like it used to in previous parades? And what could that weapon be? For an in-depth analysis on North Korea, we invited Doctor Go Myong-hyun, Senior Fellow from Asan Institute for Policy Studies, into the studio. Dr. Go, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here.
And we also have Dr. Mark Berry, Associate Editor Emeritus from International Journal on World Peace, joining live from New York through Skype. Dr. Berry, welcome and thank you so much for your time.
Yes, good to be with you and great to be with Dr. Go.
All right, Dr. Go, first question to you. Now, a large-scale military parade is expected to take place today to mark the 75th anniversary of the Korean People's Army. Before we get into the details, I'd like to know what significance does this day have and what makes it so important that it was designated as one of the national anniversaries.
So what's interesting about this particular day, the anniversary of the foundation of Korea's People's Army, is that it was, clearly the Korea People's Army was founded 75 years ago from today in 1948, February 8th. But then North Korea changed the date to April 25th in 1978, claiming that the root of, or the origin of the Korean People's Army dated back to 1932, when protectively Kim Il-sung claimed that he founded the so-called Korea People's Revolutionary Army. So back in 1932, the two Koreas were a colony of Japan, the Japanese Empire, and much of Kim Il-sung's legacy is based on the claim that he's a very strong, staunch anti-Japanese fighter. So he, in a way, by moving this date to April 25th, North Korean regime wanted to claim that the root or the origin of the Korea People's Army dated back to the very essence of the beginning of the anti-Japanese struggle by the founder of North Korea, Kim Il-sung. So that was the case until 2018. So the foundation day for the Korea People's Army wasn't February 8th like today, but it was actually April 25th. But in 2018, North Korea suddenly declared that the date of the foundation of Korea People's Army would move back to February 8th today. And the previous date, the April 25th, will be designated as the foundation day for the Korea People's Revolutionary Army. And so there's been speculations about why North Korean regime decided to change the date back to February 8th. And what is interesting is that North Korea might have done that because they wanted to upstage, guess what, the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics in 2018, because February 8th on 2018 happened to be the eve of the opening ceremony for the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. And I think North Korea wanted to send a certain message to not just to South Korea, but the international community by having a military parade. And indeed, they showcased their intermediate range ballistic missiles, as well as the ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile, the Hwasong-15 in 2018. So clearly, North Koreans, I think, even though they claim they attach a lot of meaning and significance to this date, the primary purpose of having this date or celebrating this day is essentially to set up the stage to have a military parade where they can showcase their latest strategic weapons.
Wow, it is really interesting how North Korea changed the date for a certain purpose. Now, Dr. Berry, watchers say there is a high possibility that the parade will be held at night. But is a nighttime parade a usual one? And what effect is North Korea aiming to achieve?
I understand that if it's held in the evening, which it could be anywhere from at the end of this program until late tonight, it might be the 5th in a row, particularly under Kim Jong-un. And, I guess he likes a show. If you're going to have flashing LEDs on on planes flying overhead in the formation of the numeral 75. If you're going to have fireworks, as you just showed on your B-roll, this is far more effective at night. So I think basically it makes great visuals for TV and for what I regard as the largely domestic audience of this parade.
Right, so it's for the great visuals. Now, Dr. Go, North Korea actually has a history of using military parades as a platform to unveil their latest weapons. What kind of weapons were unveiled at a parade last year, and what do you expect to see this year?
So North Korea using this, as I mentioned before, North Korea takes advantage of this opportunity to unveil their latest strategic weapons. Because in a way, the purpose of this parade is to send a strategic message to both Seoul and Washington that the North Korea is now a nuclear power. And at the core of this messaging is their possession of a strategic capability is, in the form of intercontinental ballistic missiles. So North Korea showcased their latest Hwasong 17 missile last year, and also they accompanied the unveiling of their latest and largest ICBM with some short-range ballistic missiles. So this, essentially the message is, in a way, it's a low-intensity form of provocations. So because what North Koreans do, they unveil their strategic weapons in parades like this, or perhaps sometimes with the Party Foundation Day, so like the Foundation Day of North Korea that takes place in October, and then following that, they actually test the weapon systems that they showcased. And so these are the steps that they take, and then it reflects their gradual increase in the provocation steps. So the concern is that North Koreans had essentially tested a solid engine ICBM a couple of months, last month, and they're going to follow this by showcasing a new ICBM system, in this case supposedly carrying a solid fuel engine, and they're going to follow this with an actual testing of the new ICBM sometimes in the near future. So in that sense, the parade, like we are going to witness tonight, could possibly contain hints of what kind of steps North Korea is going to take in the next coming months.
Right, interesting. Now, Dr. Barry, it is also largely expected that Kim Jong-un will have strong messages for South Korea and the United States as well. What could the message include? And if Kim Jong-un does not show up, would February 16th, the day of the shining star, marking the birthday of the deceased leader Kim Jong-il, be the day to expect some words?
My impression, and I may be wrong, is that Kim Jong-un tends to only give speeches at Workers' Party of Korea and military meetings, but when it comes to parades, he simply presides without necessarily giving a speech. So as I said, this parade upcoming is primarily for domestic consumption, and I don't believe Kim will speak either on his late father's 81st birthday on February 16th either. I think he's there to look like he is the man in charge and for the world to behold what they have developed despite all of the pressure from the rest of the world.
Right, so he's expected to be the man of charge to preside the whole event. Right. Now, Dr. Go, in the run-up to the Army's anniversary, Pyongyang unveiled the establishment of the Missile General Bureau. And South Korea's Unification Ministry confirmed on Tuesday that this is the first time the North Korea officially disclosed the establishment of the bureau of such kind. But what does this bureau manage, and why do you believe the North has this kind of department?
Well, in fact, North Korea has had a similar department before, and the name of the department was the Ministry of Rocket Industry. So it is believed that the General Missile Bureau is in fact an agency or organization that succeeds the Ministry of Rocket Industry. You can even say that the so-called new agency is in fact just another name for the Ministry of Rocket Industry. So, but what's interesting is that I think what Kim Jong-un did is that Kim Jong-un probably empowered the Ministry of Rocket Industry and renamed it as a General Rocket Bureau, so that Missile Bureau, sorry. So in order to give more importance to this particular ministry. I think they probably have more production capabilities. That means they are able to harness more resources for the missile production. So in a sense, I think what Kim Jong-un has done here is to elevate this particular missile industry or military industry in North Korea to the point of having the biggest priority when it comes to industrial production. So in that sense, I think it reflects the North Korea's latest strategy of a mass production of not just the nuclear weapons, but also the missiles. So, and I think it's part of the North Korean propaganda that they're digging in their heels, so to speak, in this mass production strategy of weapons of mass destruction, and this sends a message to the rest of the world that North Korea is never going to denuclearize.
Right. So he renamed the ministry to underline the importance, right?
That's what I think is going on
right.
here.
Interesting. Now, Dr. Barry, Kim also visited a military barracks to mark the founding of his army. And what was noticeable was the presence of his daughter, Kim Joo-hae. Of course, this was not her first appearance in public, but what does this mean?
Well, I think he's projecting, Chairman Kim, that he's very fond and very proud of his daughter. And I think he's been sending the broader message that his children, not necessarily Joo-hae, but his children will inherit his responsibility to lead the country in the future. But I still think, despite the headline on the Washington Post this morning that it looks like Joo-hae is the horse to bet on, I think we read too much into it to say that Joo-hae is indeed the successor. She's considered a filial daughter for sure, but I think Kim's conveying that North Korea will not end with Kim's generation, but continue with the next generation of his family.
Right, so he's stressing that Pyongyang's, such kind of a goal is going to continue with the next generation. Dr. Go, meanwhile, a warning from Pyongyang came 2 days after the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin held a meeting with his South Korean counterpart. And the regime threatened an eye-for-an-eye response if the U.S. continues to introduce the strategic assets on the peninsula. And what do you believe touched North Korea's nerve the most in terms of the agreements made between the United States and South Korea?
So there, I mean, what Secretary visit marked in terms of strengthening the reassurance measures for South Korea is that the United States accepted much of the demand coming from Seoul regarding strengthening the deterrence against the North. And some of the measures that's been discussed and is going to be implemented includes the deployment of a routine deployment of some strategic assets, such as the stealth jet fighters like the F-35s and F-22s. And then I think that this is something that the North Koreans find very threatening. In last November, when North Korea launched, actually, in fact, it's different. When the South Korea and the United States expanded their joint air drills, and also in these air drills included F-35s, stealth fighters, North Korea slashed out at this joint air drill because they're afraid that these stealth jet fighters are able to attack and decapitate the North Korean leadership without much warning before the attack happens. So this is a major source of concern for the North Koreans because they don't count with the counter capability to detect and prevent stealth jet incursion into their airspace. So I think this is probably something that touched their nerves. When they mentioned that they're going to match these steps step by step, it means that North Koreans are going to probably showcase their short-range ballistic missiles. And because they have done that before, I don't think they have any new type of a short-range ballistic missile in storage. So what they're going to do is probably they're going to launch a massive number of short-range ballistic missiles coinciding with the resumption of the joint military drills that are scheduled for this year and as well as next March.
Right, so they're afraid of stealth jets. Interesting. Dr. Barry, despite these kind of strong words and reaction from the North, the associate spokesperson for the UN Secretary General Florencia Sotomayor said during a briefing last Thursday that diplomatic efforts are still key to sustainable peace and denuclearization of the peninsula. But what effective diplomatic efforts could be made?
The spokeswoman for Secretary General Guterres, all the prior secretary generals have been foreign ministers of their countries. And the current secretary general represents the thinking of many other world leaders who want to avoid a dire escalation of tensions on the Korean Peninsula, and they want to see dialogue and negotiations somehow lead to productive diplomacy, possibly even to an eventual agreement among the 1953 armistice signatories to end the state of hostilities after 70 years. So if anything, many world leaders have a lot of trouble, on one hand, condemning North Korean missile launches and their other provocative acts, but seeing the U.S. and its allies appear content to just manage the status quo is something that they have a hard time doing. So the Secretary General is reflecting, I think, the larger collective wish and desire of most of the world community.
Right. Dr. Go, North Korea does not seem like it will halt the expansion of its nuclear arsenal just yet, though. And as a result, South Korea has been discussing developing its own nuclear capabilities. But apparently the U.S. is not very in favor of it, given that the U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, Sung Kim, underlined the extended deterrence during the recent interview with VOA. Now, is U.S. really against South Korea having its own nuclear capabilities?
Well, and I mean, not just in the United States, but there are many people in South Korea who are, in fact, not so much in favor of having our own indigenous nuclear capabilities. And the reason is because what comes with the alliance with the United States is the extension of U.S. Nuclear capability, which we call the nuclear umbrella or the extended deterrence. So if South Korea develops its own nuclear weapons, essentially we are making the nuclear umbrella redundant, so to speak, thereby undermining the purpose of the alliance. But then the thing is that the alliance is much more than a nuclear umbrella. So it comes with many different types of corporations, and also there's a defense commitment by the United States. So in a way, South Korea, by solely focusing on developing its own indigenous capability, we might be undermining other aspects of our security. So that's a concern that the United States has, as well as Seoul has. Another concern for the United States is that the United States has committed to the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. South Korea also has committed to the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, and that's why we renounced the right to develop nuclear weapons by becoming the member of the non-proliferation treaty. So this is a regime that is a very important pillar of the international peace, and that's one of the main missions of the United Nations as well. So there are many ramifications to having a democratic and advanced industrial country like South Korea developing its own nuclear weapons. So I think there are many complications that could follow after South Korea acquires such a capability. And then I think that it really something that's very controversial for that reason. And I think so. In a way, the United States is opposed to the idea, but it's kind of a nuanced no, because I think when push comes to shove, let's say, and then North Korea's nuclear threat becomes very threatening, then I think the United States might change its position. But then again, until that happens, and that's a big if, I think the United States is committed to the non-proliferation, just as South Korea is.
Right, so it might change the attitude, but even just before North Korea has done very strong provocations as
so exactly.
remained as a...
Yeah, it's a very complicated question. So it's not like there's no clear-cut answer to this question, so to speak.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, Dr. Barry, we need to shift the gears a little bit. The regime decided to convene the 7th enlarged plenary meeting of the ruling Workers' Party of Korea later this month, aiming to review the immediate farming issues and long-term goals for agricultural development. And experts say this is quite a rare movement, meaning the farming crisis must be very urgent in North Korea right now. Now, in your opinion, how serious are food shortages situation in North Korea right now? And would this have any effect on North Korea's provocations for this year?
Well, according to a recent report in the website 38 North, the North is facing the most serious food crisis since the famine of 1995 and 96. And that's why North Korea's relations with China are so delicate. North Korea will surely depend on Chinese food assistance through the next harvest, but that may partly explain why Kim has complied thus far with China's insistence not to conduct a seventh nuclear test so that Kim can maximize food assistance from China. But I think that primarily the lack of a seventh nuclear test reflects the fact that Xi Jinping regards himself as the new Xi Jinping, who has a certain say-so over what happens on the Chinese periphery. So there's tremendous pressure on Kim Jong-un right now, both from the emerging food crisis that we're going to see continue into September, at least, and the fact that Xi Jinping is set, in my view, new terms for what Chinese DPRK relations will be. So actually, to me, I find that the nuclear issue and the discussion of a seventh nuclear test kind of misses the forest for the trees. I think North Korea is looking to find a new balance of power where it can offset the tremendous Chinese pressure with improved relations with the United States and its allies. And we have to kind of put this 1953 armistice to rest. It has to be settled with a final settlement and to end this technical state of war.
All right. Now, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. It was great to have the discussion on North Korea, which certainly needs expert insight to help fully understand. Now, thank you, Dr. Go, for your insight. And of course, Dr. Berry, for your insights as well. We really appreciate them.
You're welcome.
All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. Hope our viewers enjoy Happy Hump Day. We will be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories on the issues happening in South Korea and, of course, around the globe. Thank you for watching and goodbye.